Hi there. We're going to make a big jump now and go from ancient Rome through to the Industrial Revolution. So, the Industrial Revolution period introduces new machinery, new processes, and new materials which form the basis for modern architecture. So, this is still background in the way that ancient Greece and ancient Rome were background in order to understand styles of building forms. And this is starting to take us to the modern era. So in this PowerPoint, I'm going to look at a little bit on the Industrial Revolution and then introduce the new building materials, well, some of them. So iron and steel, mention concrete, and mention glass. And in the next session, I'll cover those in more detail. The Industrial Revolution basically changed the way that people lived. Prior to the Industrial Revolution, most people lived in villages or in small towns, and things were made with machinery, but not in a mass-produced way. They were made individually, so workmanship, craftsmanship. With the Industrial Revolution, we see the development of the steam engine and ways of mass producing. And it completely changed society. So it's really the start of the modern era in lots of ways. And what we're looking at here is a photograph of a mill of some kind. You can see this is the production of yarn, and these are really small children working these machines. So one of the features of the Industrial Revolution was the idea that people worked for wages and labour, and the conditions were absolutely horrendous. So children were favoured because they had small fingers, they could get into machines, they could get under machines, and so here they would be tying new rolls of yarn to be spun or whatever in this machine. I don't know exactly what's happening here. Now, the Industrial Revolution started around the 1750s, and just quite simple sort of version of it really begins in Britain. Britain is a dominant world power, and they're looking for ways to increase production. So inventions of things like steam power, further development of coal mining, and the development of iron ore allows industry to expand and starts this idea of increasing production. So 1750 is really kind of start period. You will talk about, in our period, we will talk about the Industrial Revolution, and we're talking about a period from 1750 onwards, right up until 1900s. So it's a really long period of time, and there's a lot of developments. You don't have to know a lot about it except to know that it's there and this is what's happening. The impact in the 19th century, so that is in the 1800s, is in terms of increased everything. So the development of railways. So railways are huge, and it gets goods and people moving really fast and at mass amounts of goods moving, mass amounts of people moving. You get therefore an increase in trade and the use of foreign markets. So raw materials coming in from outside of Europe or Britain, being manufactured in Britain and then being exported again. So this all ties in with the next point of the idea of colonialism and empire and colonies. And that's a whole really interesting history in itself. One of the features of the Industrial Revolution is the rise of the upper middle class and increased wealth for mill owners and factory owners. And that becomes another sort of social change as a result of the Industrial Revolution. So with this increasing wealth, you have the idea about profit, you have railways and steamships making travel and trade so easy, and generating lots of wealth, and then you have this increased industrial development and building increases as well. So everything is moving faster than it had in the pre-industrial period. To get personal here, this next section is just talking about coal mining. So Ollerton Bywater is just out of Leeds in the UK, northern England, and this is where my dad came from. And I went to visit this area in the 1979, 1980, and met my grandfather, whose father was a Yorkshire miner. This is a famous kind of thing, Yorkshire miners. So this is his colliery, and you can see there's lots of railway wagons here for taking coal, and this was a very, very grim working class life. Next slide, show you some pictures. So this is Yorkshire coal mining. So for me, this is one part of my family background. Do you notice these guys' faces are so blackened? This is from coal dust. These are young guys deep underground and mining for coal. It's really, really hard work. So my great-grandfather went in the mine at the age of 12, came out of the mine to retire at the age of 65, and apparently died shortly thereafter. It was a hard life. This is a modern photograph of coal miners, and Margaret Thatcher in the 1980s closed down the coal mines. So this is an industry that's pretty much disappeared. The next slide here. Again, this is the kind of work. So they were working in tunnels that weren't high enough to stand in. There's photographs you can find of men working in their underpants. It was so hot and dangerous down there. On this photograph here, there's a really interesting video. It's a young woman talking. She's obviously done this as maybe it's her PhD research or something. And she talks you through the process. I recommend watching it. It goes for about 15 minutes. I had a few tears here and there watching it because it's just a heartbreaking life that I don't really understand. And when I think about the personal connection to it, it's like, oh, okay. So, I'm going to start it. Let's go to the next slide. So what happens? The rise of industrial towns. So coal is used to produce steam, which runs steam engines. And then steam engines are used to run the mills and all sorts of factories. So here's an example. Again, you can see my personal family kind of connections here. So 925 woolen mills in Yorkshire in 1900. That's a massive amount of production. And so the countryside, burning coal, everything becomes blackened with coal dust, with coal smoke, to the point where the Midlands became known as the Black Country. It's all pretty desperate. So how does this relate to architecture? So industry is king, particularly up in the north, and these are two factories. And I love this photograph here, taken from a very low angle. Look at this ornate entrance to a factory. You've got all of these Egyptian style motifs. So this is 19th century, huge fascination and interest in ancient Egypt. And we've got all of these motifs here. This is like a temple. It's a temple to industry. And here is a mill, and look at the size of this mill as a workplace in the 1790s. And it's all masonry, so this is brick. And this is probably about as high as buildings could go at this stage in terms of structure and structural limitations. So industry and the Industrial Revolution reshapes Britain and the world. And here's a carpet factory. Look at this. It's a Venetian Gothic style. So you could look at photographs of Venice, the Doge's Palace, and you'd think that, looking at this photograph, that you were maybe in Venice. So the Gothic style means that the arches are not rounded but pointed, and this elaborate chevron brickwork through here. All of this costs a lot of money, and so when you get such elaborate and detailed architectural forms, this is not just utilitarian. So this is a carpet factory, but everybody understands, looking at this building, that this is the production of wealth here. So now we're moving on to aspects of building construction. So the new materials that are available to build in, and which offer a change in architecture, is the development of cast iron. Now this in itself is not a new material. Wrought iron and steel, which is a new material. So this photograph here is a fountain. It's cast iron and in sections of it, not all of it. And so, this is a very elaborate Victorian design. So once you can start using cast iron, wrought iron, or steel, you can build larger frames that can go higher and stronger. So that offers all sorts of potential. Now, this is really gorgeous. This is the first cast iron bridge. It's Colebrook Dale. As the name suggests, one of the areas where there was ready sources of coal for mining in Britain. This is the section that's all cast iron. Just draw your attention to this design here. This term is OG. So OG is where you get a pattern created by two curves, opposing curves. So there's a curve this way, curve that way. It makes this gorgeous shape. That's a design word, OG, O-G-E-E. So if you want to follow connections, this connection through there, this link, you'll find some more material on Wikipedia, which is a great source if you just want to find out some kind of technical information about how iron is made or anything like that. So this was an important early building. Okay, this slide here, again, more connections through to Wikipedia. Cast iron is really strong in compression, and so it's used in creating arches. It's really good for that, hence the bridge. Fun fact, cast iron, it was invented in China in the 5th century BC, so it's been around for ages, and was originally designed to create smaller objects. You might have a cast iron frying pan at home. I used to have one. So there are issues with cast iron as a building material, that it does have weaknesses, and so other irons are used as well. So wrought iron, you might have heard of this expression, wrought iron railings, fences. It's just a slightly different way of making iron. So all iron's made by melting it. It has a low melting point, and there's all sorts of technical stuff you can find out about the amounts of different materials in it. This is a foundry again. This is a Chinese illustration of an early foundry. But then wrought iron is then worked by hand like a blacksmith, so hammering and so on. So each iron has a different kind of quality, so cast iron or wrought iron, and within those terms there are all sorts of other iron names as well. Nowadays, a wrought iron is not made as much, and steel is much more likely to be used. So wrought iron